Across advanced nations, water safety policy relies on a shared public health objective. Both Australia and the United Kingdom have established aggressive, long-term targets for the year 2030, with the explicit goal of cutting their national drowning rates entirely in half. This is a line graph tracking drowning fatality rates across the US, the UK, and Australia from 2015 to the present. Instead of a steady decline toward that 2030 goal, the data reveals a sharp upward curve, a statistical rebound that began globally in 2021. The primary catalyst for this statistical spike was the interruption of physical education infrastructure. During the pandemic, lockdown protocols forced widespread facility closures, bringing structured skill acquisition to a complete halt. This pause in education exposed a deeper vulnerability in how we teach people to swim. Without constant, uninterrupted access to a pool to maintain muscle memory, basic motor skills degraded quickly in the general population. Even when aquatic centers eventually reopened, the fatality rates did not immediately correct themselves. The data indicated a systemic flaw in the curriculum itself, one that extended well beyond the temporary loss of pool time. The post-2020 rebound proved that traditional, repetition-based swimming instruction is highly brittle. Teaching humans to perform mechanical strokes in calm water is insufficient for ensuring long-term public safety. The inherent flaw in traditional swimming education is the sterile environment. We train learners in perfectly still water, intentionally isolating them from real-world variables. These two environments demand entirely different responses. A pool requires the efficient repetition of specific motor skills. The ocean requires dynamic, real-time situational decision-making. This creates a dangerous pedagogical failure known as the translation gap. The muscle memory a student builds in a calm, sterile pool does not automatically translate into panic resistance when they are dropped into a chaotic, unpredictable current. Recognizing this gap has forced a consensus among policymakers. The objective of water safety education must pivot away from pure skill acquisition. The updated framework is defined as survival competency. Under this model, an individual's ability to adapt to sudden environmental changes is prioritized heavily over their technical proficiency in a swimming stroke. To operationalize this shift, researchers developed the SOLM model, safety-oriented literal mastery. It is a specific pedagogical architecture explicitly designed to bridge the gap between knowing how to swim and knowing how to survive. The SOLM model functions as an engineering solution. It strips down the flawed public health intervention of the past century and rebuilds it to prioritize human decision-making. The structural blueprint of the SOLM model follows a progressive, three-tiered framework, moving the learner sequentially from internal awareness to external reality. The foundation of the model is Stage 1, categorized as online awareness. This initial phase involves absolutely no water. It is a completely dry, highly focused cognitive exercise. The curriculum here trains visual literacy and situational pattern recognition. Students analyze real-world data and environmental scenarios from a distance, learning to read the mechanics of the water before they ever step foot near it. A concrete example of this training is teaching a student to identify the visual markers of a rip current from the shoreline, or calculating the timing and energy of incoming wave sets. The core philosophy governing this first tier is strict. Initiating a physical rescue is always the absolute last resort. The most crucial learning objective is establishing boundaries. Students are taught that observing a dangerous situation and actively deciding not to enter the water is a measurable, valid survival skill. By completing Stage 1, the definition of water safety expands. Cognitive decision-making is placed firmly ahead of physical capability. The pedagogical sequence then moves the student from dry theory into physical execution. The immediate challenge to address in Stage 2 is human biology. Pure cognitive knowledge frequently shatters the moment physiological panic sets in. To solve this, the SOLM model draws heavily from the rigorous standardization found in the Dutch SWEM ABC model, which mandates extreme proficiency under duress. Stage 2 takes the sterile pool environment and intentionally degrades it. Instructors artificially inject pressure conditions to simulate the chaos of an actual emergency. Students are forced to navigate the water while subjected to simulated darkness, severe noise interference, group chaos, and restricted movement. They must also perform in heavy clothing. As historical training demonstrates, the physical drag of wet garments drastically alters buoyancy and increases cardiovascular strain. This controlled chaos directly facilitates a concept known as fail-safe learning. Instructors allow students to safely experience total physical exhaustion, or the failure of a rescue attempt. Experiencing these limits firsthand creates a necessary psychological impact that theoretical warnings cannot match. The purpose of Stage 2 is not to perfect a freestyle swimming stroke. It is designed to instill a calculated, lived respect for the absolute limitations of the human body under extreme stress. The apex of the SOLM model is where simulation ends entirely and real-world application begins. Advancing to Stage 3 requires leaving the pool. No indoor simulation, regardless of how stressful, can accurately replicate the complex dynamics of open water. This stage draws from the Australian educational approach. Direct exposure to the raw coastal environment early in development builds an organic intuition for natural hazards. This sharply contrasts with standard school curriculums in places like Taiwan or Japan, which index heavily on achieving high proficiency in swimming pools, but offer minimal practical experience in open water. The mechanics of Stage 3 revolve around executing a standardized ocean skills checklist in a live environment. Students must perform tasks like selecting a safe entry point based on live tide conditions and shifting sandbars, rather than pointing to a textbook diagram. This forces the learner to retrieve the cognitive visual literacy they built in Stage 1 and apply it while managing the physical exhaustion they learned to tolerate in Stage 2. Successful completion is validated through a formal certification structure, scaling from Level 1 to Level 3 based on environmental difficulty and independent decision-making. Stage 3 effectively closes the translation gap. It ensures that classroom survival theory is permanently bonded to real-world environmental intuition. When viewed in its entirety, the SOLM framework reveals itself as a highly integrated pedagogical system. Its primary achievement is synthesis, fusing the physical standardization of the Dutch system with the environmental realism of the Australian approach. Rather than a linear checklist, these stages operate as a continuous, self-reinforcing loop. Knowing informs the initial decisions. Doing tests the physical limits under stress, and adapting anchors that behavior into the reality of the open ocean. This loop actively solves the vulnerability exposed during the 2021 rebound. It addresses the systemic flaw of populations possessing adequate motor skills, but lacking the decision-making capacity to deploy them safely. Survival is not a static trait you earn and keep forever. It is a dynamic loop you must constantly execute. The implications of the SOLM model scale significantly when applied to macro-level public health policy. It elevates water safety from a basic physical education requirement into a broader framework of community responsibility. The architecture integrates leave no trace principles directly into its curriculum, intertwining individual survival skills with active environmental stewardship. The logic is straightforward. Understanding and respecting the mechanical power of the water inherently breeds respect for the preservation of the waterway itself. The ultimate policy objective is structural. It moves water safety out of physical education and establishes it as a fundamental component of civic literacy. By engineering better decision-makers at the individual level, governments can reduce long-term drowning statistics while building a highly adaptable, environmentally conscious society.